I'd like to express welcome, Fritz, who I will refer to by, I'll call you the assessor or Fritz. I'll do it interchangeably. In this instance, I'll use your name. I want to express my condolences to you over the loss of your father earlier this month. I'm reading the obituary. Walter Kaegi was a remarkable man. He was an historian. He focused on Byzantine history and just a remarkable person. And Fritz, we offer our condolences to you over your loss.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. I think at this point, a few years into your tenure as Cook County Assessor, long introductions describing your past life and your accomplishments and background is probably unnecessary, but I will just say that you have a background in financial management, money management. You've got the degrees in I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but the assessment tools that are needed to be an educated and informed assessor, knowing best practices are all notches on your belt that you've built up over time. And, you know, there's so many issues I'd like to get into during this hour. And I'm really happy and excited about a couple of our colleagues who are housing providers who will be joining us during this call. But, you know, the challenges for affordable housing is on everybody's mind. Many of us who are housing providers look at some of the initiatives brought forward on which we're not even consulted, and they're mandated. You know, the Affordable Requirements Act requiring 20% on new development, and this notion of lifting the ban on rent control. And these are notions that just anger and those of us in the industry know that doesn't work, with unintended consequences. And the one thing that housing providers do say is, let's have incentives. Treat the housing provider with respect, make it voluntary, and give us incentives to create affordable housing. And in fact, that's what the state legislature did last session in 2021. And if I'm understanding it correctly, you locally are charged with implementing a program which I've learned is called the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program. So this is the first thing that on our agenda today is for you to review the program. We are not going to get into the weeds on it. I think our goal is to make sure people are aware that it exists. And then at some point while you're talking, I might have Maggie insert information on the CIC, Community Investment Corporation program on Thursday, that it's not too late for people to register if they want to get deeper into the program. But, you know, for 5 to 10 minutes, Fritz, if you can share with us that which you know about the program.
Sure, Mike, thanks. First of all, everyone here, thank you for being here. It's good to see so many familiar faces. I was telling Mike before we started that I enjoy coming back to this group. We always come out, we always have a good discussion. We come out better for it with some action plans and homework. And I hope we'll come out of that today. So yes, the thing I wanted to talk to everyone about that's new is this new program that basically is widening what had been the previous Class 9 program in many different ways. And what it does is it basically incentivizes the construction of affordable rental housing in Cook County, not only in the city, but also in the suburbs. My associate Scott Smith is posting all the key links here in the chat. Go and check out some of the webinars that we've had. If you want to really dig into the detail, we've had a lot of good ones with the Chicago Rehab Association and others, and we've had several different specialized events where you can get the information. The deadline to apply is March 31st. If you're having trouble with some aspects of the application, please just reach out to us. We're happy to take your questions and help you with it, including, you know, if you feel like you don't understand the form or if you need more information. This was a bill that was passed with the hard work of you and many other organizations, affordable housing groups and others in the General Assembly last session. You know, the bill was passed unanimously, but as anyone can tell you who's ever done work in Springfield, getting to a unanimous vote requires an incredible amount of work. We did this with Senator Feigenholz and Gillespie, so many different stakeholders, and it's not only incentivizing new construction, but also the rehabilitation of affordable housing. And it allows housing that is where rents are linked to income to be valued and to get a special reduction in incentive for properties that are making that undertaking. It also gives us information so we can value properties and be aware of properties that are part of the program. So we are implementing this now. The deadline is the 31st, it's the recommended deadline, and we have a lot of online means for you guys to check it out. We can take more specific questions here. I know we have lots of different questions to get to, but this is something that we know you guys have wanted, have been working on. We know that people have been asking for it across the county. We are really happy to work with our legislative partners on this to make it happen, and we're implementing it now. And we have a team hard at work in our incentives team to process all the applications as they come in. So we can take more questions about it, Mike. Where do you think people's main interest would be on this one?
Well, yeah, I think if you can just outline that there's an opportunity here to get a 25% reduction or a 35% reduction on your assessment, what does somebody have to do? How long is that restriction in place? Just those basics.
Sure. Let's see. We can, Scott, do we have some slides that we could give them that sort of goes through there are sort of 3 different ways you can qualify. There are 3 different tiers. Scott, do you have any slides that we can give him here? It might be easier if we all visualize it.
Yep, I'm just going to toss a couple up. I think there's a few that are kind of most applicable to folks. This tiers of affordability is kind of the primary one. So there's 3 tiers now with this program, which expands what is considered affordable. So there's a 15, 35, and then the low affordability community. This is all in statute. This is all language in statute. But you can see now that this is expanding the type of properties that are considered affordable. What we're looking at here is a maximum rent means a maximum regular rent for 60% of AMI. We have this is, by the way, I'll drop these links in the chat. I know we don't want to go too deep in the weeds on some of this stuff, but when we're talking about affordable, we have a bunch of different slide presentations on the affordable housing section of our website that talks about all the different qualifying activities, the minimum size, and what some of the investment thresholds are as well. So we've got all this information up here. I know a lot of people have a lot of specific questions about their property. So we can kind of talk about that here. The other thing I'll mention is we have a specific email address, and I'll drop that in the chat as well, but it is on that page I linked to. It is assessor.affordablehousing@cookcountyil.gov, I believe. I'll double check that, put that in the chat. But we do have all these slides that can kind of talk through the different ways in which people can access the program depending on the different type of property that they have.
Okay.
So again, I'll drop that link in the chat.
That's great. And Maggie, if you want to just flash the Scott, I like your big guy, the restaurant guy there. What's it called? Okay.
The big boy, yeah.
Big boy, I like that. Maggie, if you can put that slide on. This is on your invitation, but if you want to learn more, Thursday's seminar, which I think is on Zoom, would be an excellent way for you to learn more about it. There's a soft deadline for applying to the program, which is coming up March 31st, but certainly if you don't apply by March 31st, you're not precluded from participating. This is a long-standing, this is the law. It's going to be around for a while. Okay, so let's move on. I'll let Maggie display this for another 20 seconds or so, but while you're displaying it, I'd like to start a discussion with you, Fritz, about some key and very timely issues. Some of this, those of us that follow the assessment game closely are aware of. Others of us will hear about this in the media, but we understand that you're late, that the process of getting out, certifying your assessments that, for many of us, we're still feeling sticker shock and anxious to see, move the appeal process along so that we can figure out how we're going to operate our buildings, if we can refinance our property, if we can sell our property. There's this big question mark that so many of us are feeling. And then now we're learning that there's a delay in these results going to the opening up for the Board of Review. Can you share with us the status of your certification of your city assessments?
Sure. We've transmitted west in Rogers Park already. We'll have another one transmitted this week, we believe. Lakeview, they're going to be transmitted pretty rapidly in the next couple of weeks. Let me give everyone a background here for why this is. For those of you on the call, I can't see everyone's face here, but I think some of you might still be in your 30s. We actually had an IT system that was deployed in the early 80s that we've still been using. It predates the existence of Post-it notes and when I was playing Space Invaders as a kid. And some of the frustrations that Rocco was talking about and some of the other callers, Acta, I believe her name was, a lot of the frustrations that people have with our assessment system and dealing with it have to do with an antiquated prehistoric IT system. They're inextricably linked. And the county recognizes, no one thought it was a good idea to have a 40-year-old computer system at the heart of America's largest property tax system, market-based property tax system. And so the county signed a contract with a company called Tyler Technologies to replace these different antiquated silos that were operating not only at our office, but the clerk's office, the treasurer's office. But under the Barrios administration, they did not move this forward. The assessor's office is the first to go under the plan. And it's just getting dangerous that this old system continues to go on. Only a couple elderly programmers know how to work it, and it could break down at any time. It was like a rickety bridge that had been held up over the years but needed replacing. And so we replaced it. We put in place online appeals in 2020, the first module of the system, and then we replaced the system of record last year. And if you're trying to understand why things are late, that is basically why it's late. Several months. If any of you guys have ever tried to do IT work in the private sector, especially in the financial sector, where you're replacing things like mainframes, there's a lot of testing and work that can be kind of tedious and making sure that everything's transferring over correctly. But we're really proud to say that we've done it. Tony Preckwinkle and the County Bureau of Technology has been pretty great in doing that. And those frustrations that you felt with our assessment system, a lot of them had to do with bad technology, bad IT. We're going to start putting a lot of those in the rearview mirror. One of the things that I'm really pleased to talk to you guys about today that really speaks to some of the frustrations that you were talking about, Mike, as well as your needs for the appeals process. The new system is going to allow every commercial model to be available to the public right now without needing a FOIA. And Scott, is that up live now on the website?
Sorry, I was addressing one of the questions in the chat. Which thing is
public access?
It's not live yet on there, but one of the things that is going that did go live today, which I think is going to be really helpful for people, is information about how we assess commercial property. So we've listed all the different worksheets our analysts use that break down all the different components that go into those assessment equations. And so for people who are saying, how did you arrive at this assessment? What rent are you using? what expenses, what's the NOI. All that information is now available online in our commercial reporting. We can show that if there's some interest there. But that's going to be really helpful as folks, we're going to be doing this on an ongoing basis. We just published it for Chicago. Obviously, those appeals are going to now be taken at the Board of Review. But going forward, when we do the north suburbs this year, when we do the south suburbs next year, and Chicago again in a few years, you'll be able to actually see after the initial assessments are out, what factors are going into our equation, which will allow you to get information from our office that can then be used in your appeal at our office. So I think it's a huge boost for transparency.
Yeah, so some of those frustrations that Mike and Rocco and Arlecto were talking about, you can now look at the worksheet that our analysts created and the inputs that they use to come up with the value of your property. And if it's off, if our estimate of the value of your property is off, you'll probably very quickly get to the heart of why our model might have been off. We think transparency is the value in its own right, but it's also really important to getting to us being accountable, but also us being able to improve, and you being able to navigate the appeals process much better. So that's an example of how this new IT system is going to make a difference for you. It's going to reduce costs for the county because we won't have this ever-present risk of a 40-year-old system breaking down and us having to pay through the nose for a couple of elderly programmers. And the other county offices can now start their phase of the county's plan as well. It will reduce errors. It will provide more services like the one we just talked about, where we're opening up all the commercial models. You don't need to have a FOIA anymore. We expect to see a lot of other tools and services available there.
So this is, I've been last few days talking to a lot of different folks who are in the industry who know a lot more about the industry than I do. And there's so many questions about how do you go about, and I'm talking class 3 multifamily properties. How's he doing it? Even Larry Rogers mentioned that in his Crane's interview. Are you using cap rates exclusively? Are you using sales data? How are you getting the rents? And you've run, your whole platform was based on transparency.
Yeah.
And if this is delivered in the manner that you're discussing, I think it's a huge deal.
Yeah, well, like we always have used cap rates that represent market rates, that rents that represent our estimate of the market. We showed our sources, but now you'll be able to see it for yourself. And this is something that our other appeals venues do not do. I have no idea how they come up with their numbers, and they don't really explain them.
Okay, so I want to stick on the timing issue with a couple more questions. How delayed will, what's the schedule? When will we owe our second installment 2021 bills in the city? This is a big one for us. When do we think we'll be paying those bills?
It's not in our hands to say. It's really in the Board of Review's hands for them to take the assessment information that we've given them. In last tax year, the bills were payable 2 months after the original date. We'll see if we can hit that again this year. I think the key thing that everyone needs to know is that we're doing our part to replace an IT system that had to be replaced, if not this year, then next year. The Board of Review already has, I think, something like more than half of the towns that they can work with. I think they've just started doing hearings, and it's going to start to be, the dependency will start to be in their hands rather than ours.
Hey, Mike, I wondered if too, I know that Rocco had raised this issue, and I know we're getting a couple questions in the chat about the differences between increases in assessments versus increases in taxes. And I think, a little of that property tax 101 goes a long way, because I know a lot of people assume that if the assessment goes up a certain amount, then the taxes go up a certain amount. And I thought it might be good to kind of address some of those, some of those questions here.
I think that's, we've got everything from owners of 2 flats to owners of hundreds of units. We got a whole range of knowledge in this room. And I think it's always good to have that basic.
Yeah.
So please feel free to go there.
Yeah, so Scott, if you want to drive some slides and I can just quickly narrate them. Rocco, it's perfectly natural for you to think if your assessment goes up 80%, that your taxes are going to go up 80%. I know it's a shock if that happens. First of all, the thing to ask yourself is the assessment that we've sent out an accurate estimate of the market value of the property? Because it might have been inaccurately estimated before, might have appreciated since then. But the thing to ask yourself is it an accurate estimate of the value of the property? And say you think it is accurate and it has gone up 80%. Your taxes are super unlikely to go up even close to 80%. The reason why is that we don't have fixed tax rates in Cook County or in Chicago. So the thing is that there are 2 different things that are determined separately. Okay. Hey Rocco, can you just hold on there and then we can talk. Your city, the Chicago Public Schools, they're the ones who determine how much money is to be raised. Actually, assessments don't determine how much money is raised in the city or anywhere else overall. That is determined by the public schools, the city of Chicago. And I hear you on the frustration that your taxes have been rising. A lot of people, their assessment didn't change over a long period of time, but their taxes rose. Why? It didn't have to do with assessments. It had to do with the fact that our city, our public schools, other public services increased the amount of tax that they're requiring the whole city to pay. And the assessor's office, no matter how we do assessments, is not going to change that. So that is a burden that's determined by our taxing bodies. Why do we do assessments? It's to divide up that burden amongst us. And so your assessment is interconnected with everyone else's assessment in determining your share of that amount of money that has to be collected. So the number to think about in Chicago is somewhere in the neighborhood of $7.5 billion is levied in property tax for Chicagoans. And that is divided across each person's share of the tax base. So here you could see over on the left, for a long time, Chicago didn't raise its levy much, and then it shot up a lot in the latter bit of the Emanuel administration. That's that feeling of taxes rising, even if your assessment didn't change. Over in the middle is what we call the tax base. This is the total assessed value in the city. And that can fluctuate, okay? So as more buildings are created in the city, as values in the market grow, generally we should expect the base to grow. That's kind of what you see going on here in the middle. You see the housing crisis happening, the base shrinking a little bit, but then expanding the latter half of the last decade. And that causes the rate to move all around in Chicago. So we don't have fixed rates. So that is why when your assessed value rises, your taxes are not going to change by the same amount because it depends on what's happening to the base. Just to give you an example. Assessments rose in assessed value rose in just about every neighborhood of Chicago this year. Okay. Something in the neighborhood of 10 to 20% in some neighborhoods, others more. But there are only 6 neighborhoods out of the city's 77 neighborhoods where the share of burden has increased. In most neighborhoods, even though assessed values are up, share of burden is down. Taxes overall will be down in those neighborhoods. So Rocco, that is an important thing. It's not very intuitive. It's frustrating for an investor to try to guess at. We have tried to give a lot of tools for the public to try to estimate where this is going in terms of how much is the base growing. That's why we report with each part of the city when we did the assessment. how much the base is changing. We've given you tools to estimate rates depending on different scenarios. So I just wanted to give that for you, Rocco, because you're not the only one who has those feelings, okay? And we're here to be your service to, you know, if your assessment went up 80%, I want you to know the city was up 50%. And that's not like just trying to make you feel a little bit better that you're up a little bit more than everyone else. What it means is that your taxes will go up significantly less than 80%, even if your assessment stays up 80%. And you can try to work out the math with the tools that we've given you to see what that is. The hard part is that we're not the last word on these assessments. The board review can change assessments itself, and that changes the base. That's why it's hard to predict. That's why it's so complex. No one likes this complexity, Rocco, but these are the hands of cards that we're all given. You know, what we try to do in our office is estimate the value of buildings. That is hard enough. And we try to do our best, but we also try to make sure we walk humbly when we don't have enough data to do that. And that's why we've talked a lot about different data tools and transparency here, so that, you know, we're showing where we get our numbers from, and then you can show us if we got it wrong, how we got it wrong, and why. The other thing I want you to know, Rocco, is, and you can go and check the receipts yourself. I'm not here to try to have lawyers generate fees off of you guys. I'm trying to get these numbers right, straight out at the first place, without you having to appeal. That's the basic measure that we use at our office. What is the, how are we doing for the average person who doesn't appeal? I'm happy to say appeals are down by about a third since we've come into office for 3 straight years. We are within industry standards.
Appeals to you, to your,
yeah, to our office are down by about a third. Yeah. And you know, the assessments that we sent out in the first year of our administration were found to be within industry standards for accuracy and equity and uniformity for the first time ever. So we know that some people will appeal to other places, and you have every right to do that. But part of the reason why the appeals are declining is we're getting it closer to the mark, and some people are seeing more fairness. We know we've got to win people more over on that. We're trying. We know there's more work to do here, but we think it's going in a positive direction. That's why we do all the transparency and the technology work and showing our work and showing our sources. But just know that I'm not here to try to maximize fees for lawyers. And I think if you check around a little bit, Rocco, that we're not from that crew. We've made appeals anonymous to our analysts. They don't see the identity of lawyers anymore. I don't take campaign contributions from those people. I'm the first assessor to do that. We've created a visitor's log so you can check for yourself to see who's coming and going, that there's no special deals being made here. And we're showing our work. We put all our models out there so you can see them. So I'm all ears on how to make it even more accountable. I like your idea, Rocco, of just having an assessment that's related to income, so it's more predictable. We are trying to get some more predictability here so you can underwrite better.
Let's implement it.
I can't do it myself because we don't have fixed rates in this state. Our office is a creation of the General Assembly. There are a couple of other offices that are also a creation of the General Assembly. And we have 1,000 different taxing bodies in Cook County alone. So that predictability that you want is kind of wound up with what are we going to do with these 1,000 taxing bodies and their needs to generate property taxes.
The percentage could be.
I'm sorry, Rocco, your input's very valued, but I can't start opening this up for folks, but I think you've been well heard and many people share your sentiment.
My apology.
No apologies. We really value you being here. I just don't want to let go of this timing issue because I anticipate some anxiety that might enter into the system. It's likely or possible that the second installment bills won't be due until as late as December or even into 2023. And then within only a couple months, we're going to owe for the first installment of 2022 in March of 2023. what is that a likely scenario? I know that's perhaps a little bit out of your hands, but are there concerns about this delay in paying in the revenue coming into the county?
We have all tried to keep this on schedule as much as possible. It's a lot of the timing is really going to be determined by what the board review does with its own procedures at this point. It's impossible for me to tell you the rhythm and cadence that they will have. We typically wrap up our assessments in December, and this year, we finished up our appeals in February. The board review has had in hands a lot of data since then, and it can act on it. So, if you add, if you just work through the calendar, you can try to estimate
when do you think all the results will be certified and in the board of review's hands for all the townships in Chicago?
I can speak a little bit to that. So West is out this week. That was obviously a big complex series of pins. This appeals data, and we can even show some if there's some interest, is done. Our appeals have been processed. At this point, we are working with the board of review in order to get that material certified. When we take the data from our new system, it has to go back into that old 40-year-old mainframe and then back out to the board system. So we've got a number of different systems that are at play here because this can't all be done at once. It has to be done in phases. So it's a complex thing, but folks should know that our appeals are done. We are just having to work through the IT portion now with the board of review. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be putting out some information about the results of the 2021 reassessment that are going to show by township, where did the residential assessment come out, where is the commercial assessment come out, and also show data how we've done this work keeping in mind the different property types and the different neighborhoods. So you're not going to see the same levels of increases in assessments that in say South Shore that you would in Lakeview. And we're going to show some of that data, and people will be able to see for themselves how location factors into this work.
Okay.
And just one last little note, Mike. This was really the best time to do the county's plan on the technology because when you talk to taxing bodies, they are more cashed up than they have been in years for several different reasons. All the different federal aid that flowed through to taxing districts. When I survey the taxing bodies out there, more of them have more cash reserves this year than they had last year. And remember, I think we also have to remember that the taxing bodies do get the first property tax payments, in January and February every year. So this was the year to do it, and we're glad it's done. And it's important for. I know you guys. It's really going to make you sad to pay your property taxes a little bit late, but this is something that was inevitable. If it didn't happen this year, it would have had to happen next year with more costs and more risk.
I just want to say on behalf of virtually everybody who's a housing provider, we're all familiar with property management software programs and what's involved in updating to new programs, the complexities, the headaches, the hassles, and that's just going from the previous generation property management to the next. So I can only imagine that when you use the term Space Invader program, to describe how old the system that you're replacing is, you're going back many generations of software.
Yeah.
So I know this has been waiting and ready and needs to happen. So I do applaud you for getting this done. And hopefully the whole system's going to be operating a lot better for everybody as a result.
Yeah, and I mean it already is. You'll see tangible benefits from.
Moving on, you introduced the concept to me that I wasn't familiar with. My friend Mike Hagenson mentioned it in a chat. What is this notion of baseline?
Oh well, so the baseline. This is the property tax base. So when the property tax base in Chicago was up about 50%. In 2021 over where it was before. What that means is that if your assessment is up the same amount as the base, your share of the levy is unlikely to change very much. And that would mean the property tax you pay would probably only grow with the levy, like a couple of percentage points. So it's really helpful for everyone who's concerned about property tax bills and what they'll look like to think about the base always, because otherwise your assessment in isolation doesn't mean much. What is really meaningful is how much your assessment changes in line with the base. And so if your assessment's up less than that 50%, everything else being equal, you'd expect your share of the levy to decline and your bill also to decline once you take into account the growth in the levy. So that's something really important to remember. Now, there are some caveats. People can appeal to the board of review. That changes the base from where we will be certifying it. But we expect to be certifying a base that, give or take, is up around 50%. And that is a really helpful number to keep in mind, because most neighborhoods, when you include commercial and residential together, their assessed value is not up 50%. It's up less than that. That will mean that more money is staying in the neighborhoods. Their bills will be collectively lower in the second half of the year. What's the intuition behind this? There was a lot of undervaluation of the really big buildings, okay? And you out there who own property out in the neighborhoods have been shouldering the burden for artificial undervaluation of the biggest buildings downtown. By us solving for that, making sure that all buildings, no matter how big or small, are in line with the market, that means that except for 6 neighborhoods, the other 71 neighborhoods will either have the same amount of share of the burden or lower share of the burden. This is again before the effect of the board review and their appeals, but based on our certifications, that is the importance of the base, because even though assessments increase in every neighborhood, most neighborhoods' share of the burden is decreasing. Why the difference? It's because of the fact that the base is up 50%.
Okay, thank you for that. And perhaps Scott can share with us what those 6 townships are that you referred to.
And sorry, they're not townships, they're neighborhoods.
Neighborhoods,
So,
okay. Neighborhoods.
So it's those 6 would be the Loop, Lower West Side, near North Side, near West Side, that's like Fulton Market, and O'Hare. So basically think of, the greater Loop is constituting, including Fulton Market, is constituting more of the base than before, and the rest of the neighborhoods either staying in place or shrinking slightly in terms of their share of the burden. More money staying in the neighborhood.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that 50%.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to introduce you to one of my new colleagues on the NBOA. The NBOA has 9 neighborhood building owner organizations that comprise us. We had a turnover in the presidency of the Greater Austin Area Group, and it's been a pleasure for me to get to know Sean Easton, who's on this call. And I know Sean would like to share his situation and ask a question. So Sean?
Thanks, Mike. Hey, Scott and Fritz, how are you today?
Good. Good to see you, Sean.
Hey, good to see you too. I appreciate, this has been really helpful hearing this stuff, but it doesn't really answer my frustrations with what's going on, with my building in my neighborhood. One of my buildings is a 23 unit in Austin. And, I fought through the pandemic to get the rehab done, get it filled up. And then in 2021, when I'm going to refi and kind of exit and stabilize the building, I got hit with my tax bill, and it had increased 270%, roughly the assessment. And it kind of valued my building. If you look at if you do market rates, market rent, market expenses, the system ended up valuing it at a 4 cap. And this is the west side of Austin. And, where stuff on the high end trades at like an 8.5 cap. So, to me, I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Because I'm kind of stuck in the mud with this assessment. And unfortunately, I was doing a lot in the community too with some of our rent money. And my partners and I had to stop that because we had to look at this assessment and say, hey, how do we do this? So we call our attorney, and he's like, oh, I'll get it lowered to X, Y, and Z. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is absolutely frustrating, because it's almost like the attorneys are incentivized for the tax appeal to go up so then they can bring it back down. They make more money. And then myself as a landlord is paying out more money. So it goes to the attorney, it goes to the city. It's just like, I feel like I'm bleeding everywhere. So I guess to summarize, a couple questions around this are, what's going on with the 270% increase roughly? Is that something that was a mistake, or what can I do to help get that solved? Either get ahead of it in the future or basically figure it out now. And then two, is there anything that's happening to have this done where it doesn't feel like it's incentivized for the attorneys and almost the city working together? And then three, is the timeline truly next, like end of this year to next year? I know you guys have kind of answered the timeline one. It's kind of in the board review hands, but I guess if you can just give me any kind of help, just kind of around what's going on, I think that'd be helpful for me. And I know I've talked to a bunch of other landlords where they're in similar situations.
Thank you, Sean. And it's never a happy moment when I hear a story like yours. Like, we get as frustrated as you do when it sounds like a value that our analysts had worked on was not on the mark, and that it costs you frustration and money to solve it. First thing I want you to know is that there is no incentive to raise assessed value to a ludicrous level, because in terms of revenue, because as I said, the taxing bodies, they collect the same amount of revenue no matter where total assessed value ends up. Okay, your share of burden would change. It's true, and we're frustrated when we've estimated a value of a building that fell off the mark. It sounds like what might have happened could have been a combination of us missing the mark on the rents, on the cost ratio, on the vacancy rate, and on the cap rate. It could have been all of those. What have we tried to do so that these situations don't happen? We've tried to do several things. First of all, we sent out a form to every single commercial parcel owner in the city last year and in the south suburbs the year before. It's called RPI, the Real Property Income and Expense Form. So you can give us that relevant information before we send out the assessments and not have to wait until the appeals process to cure the error. You have to fill out the RPI when you appeal anyway, so might as well just fill it out, give us the relevant information. It will reduce, most people who fill it out are glad that they did, because they're starting at a point that it eliminates any mistakes that might have happened from us having inadequate information. We might have different arguments as to what a market cap rate is or what a market rent is, but at least you're giving your best foot forward. We want more people to participate in the RPI program. The uptake is increasing. Unfortunately, your suspicions about the lawyers are right. They have an incentive to keep on correcting the same old errors every year rather than having us start off at a better point. We're trying to bypass all of that by going directly to you to say, hey, why don't you fill out this form and have us start out at a more accurate point. Then you can do all the appeals that you usually do if you want to, but at least we've started out at a better point. Also, a couple people have mentioned that your lawyers are charging you percentages on whatever you don't have to do that. There's no rule that says you have to do that. Lots of people negotiate fixed fees. You don't have to use a lawyer. We're trying to make more and more people are appealing pro se without hiring a lawyer, because it's just about data in the end. And remember that our analysts are not looking at the identity of lawyers when they do these appeals. They're just looking.
Fritz, it's a scary notion to without the lawyer's assistance. There's a level of distrust and the fear of so-called being clobbered or stuck with sticker shock to voluntarily comply. And Maggie, if you're there, you can show the form. I've already told you it's not an easy form. how do you address this notion that people don't really trust the voluntary submission of data like this? What's the response to that concern?
Well, I think, look, it's a change in culture, right? Like, I get it that people aren't exactly happy to see the assessor walk by. They're not exactly happy to submit data to the assessor's office. They're not used to us trying to be helpful, trying to get you started at a better number. But we are, and we're trying to show our hands each day on how we do this. We get more transparent. We're giving you more tools each year, basically, you do not have to fill out the whole form. You can fill out the rent roll portion. And we're trying to improve the user friendliness of the form every year. We are happy to take your feedback. One of the reasons why the form is a little bit more complex comes from user feedback. Some people want to give us information about rent concessions that they might have made for tenants or rent that was not collected. These are the kinds of things that we know are adjustments to effective rent that people want there.
So Fritz, if things are going well, where we have a strong occupancy, we're able to sustain our operation, what's the incentive for us to comply with this voluntary program?
What's the incentive if
to comply and voluntarily give you this information?
If you have strong occupancy?
Yeah, if things are going well, right.
Well, it's always possible that we might be missing something that's relevant to your property. If you are outperforming, let's just say you're outperforming the average asset in your sector, we're not going to set our assessment to the higher level of income that you might earn on your apartment building. We are assigning sort of average rents to like buildings. Okay, so if you're a more efficient operator, Mike, of your apartment buildings than the guy next door, then everyone else in your block who operates the same kind of apartment building, we're using average rents across a whole category. So that's not a disincentive there. The incentive really is especially if you own a neighborhood building or one that's a little bit older or idiosyncratic, if it has higher operating costs, if it has maybe lower effective rents because it's a walk-up or it doesn't have AC, those kinds of qualitative things are the kinds of things that's very easy for us to miss. And we think many kinds of property owners are glad when we did this. Water Tower Place, which is owned by one of the biggest property owners in the world, they filled out the RPI for Water Tower, and they were glad that they did because they could show us in a way that we couldn't see just from looking at market data, what the impact of some of the things that they were experiencing was. And I think that's true. If it's true for Brookfield, it's going to be true for a lot of the people on the call here today who own older properties out in the neighborhoods where maybe you're not getting the same rent that's reported on CBRE. Maybe you're not getting that same occupancy or rent collection that we might get from CoStar. I know I've talked to a lot of you guys. CoStar is sometimes fantasy land, if we don't have sometimes that data that you report is better than what's coming out of a CoStar, which might be the thing that we're relying on.
Well, intuitively, why not give you the data you need to make an accurate assessment? That's an intuitive.
Yeah. And if you expect to appeal, you have to fill it out anyway.
No, that's possible. I'd like to. I'm really excited to introduce to you another one of our members who happens to be a smaller owner. She owns more of the 2-flat, 4-flat. She's also head of the Chicago Multifamily Club with at least 2,000 members. This is a couple of years ago, I took that note, so she's probably up to 3,000 now. But Nicole, are you available and can you ask your question?
Yep, yeah, I'm here.
Nicole Valenzuela, thank you.
I do have a little guest with me, so I couldn't get a babysitter today. But thanks for having me on, and thank you so much, Assessor Fritz and Scott. Really appreciate your time and the information. One of the questions that I've seen across the board, just from the members in my group, and then also just from myself and my experiences that I'm seeing, and the members in my group are seeing, assessment values really consistent from their small multifamily properties, where a lot of the people in the Chicago Multifamily Club only have like 1 or 2 buildings, from their commercial properties too. So, I mean, with the platform narrative being shifting the tax burden from residential taxpayers to commercial taxpayers, we just really want to understand is how is this shift benefiting everyday people like myself, the people of the Chicago Multifamily Club, with these assessment increases being so high, really just across the board from residential small multifamily properties to like commercial 6+ units.
Well, thanks so much for your question, Nicole. And this is one that we get a lot. You're right. I mean, you represent your association. I forget how many thousands of units are represented by you guys.
Well, it's property owners, so about 3,000 property owners now.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to remember is that, like, when we talk about residential or commercial, like there's a wide spectrum across each of them, and the experience is different based on the market. The market in Chicago and Cook County is so widely varied, and we're trying to be a mirror to that market. And the experience that a building owner has in South Shore or Washington Park, it's going to be real different from Pilsen or Austin or another neighborhood like Fulton Market. Like, there are very different experiences in each of those places. I think an important thing to note, Nicole, I mentioned at the start of this call, is that even though in just about every neighborhood assessed value is up, in the 77 neighborhood areas, just 6 of them are seeing an increased share in the levy, and that's including both commercial and residential. Most of the neighborhoods are seeing either flat or down share of the burden, which means money will be staying in the neighborhoods. That's money that will be spent on local businesses, on creating local jobs, on staying in people's pockets, paying down debt, and giving that local entrepreneur who wanted to open a business more of a shot at succeeding, because they're not assuming the burden that they were before. And that's true of commercial businesses as well as residential. There's several neighborhoods where commercial is staying in place or decreasing as its share of the burden as well, even though the assessments are up. And that's why this concept of remembering, okay, the base overall up in Chicago is up 50%. Where's my property fitting on that spectrum? If it's significantly lower than 50%, even after the effect of board review appeals, we might expect the bill to be down in the second half of the year. If it's up more, you'd probably expect the bill to be up, but not up by as much as the assessment change, because that baseline is on the order of up 50% before the effect of board of review appeals. And before the city decides what it does with its levy. That's the other part. The city, if it raises its levy and assessments stay in place, taxes will go up because the pie, this burden, is bigger, and we're all dividing it up in the same way. So that's why this equation is a little bit complex. But Nicole, just to answer your question, I just wanted to say you are interconnected with what is going on overall in the city, and the big buildings downtown were found to be, based on all sorts of data sources that we use, that third parties use, to be very undervalued, and we've really corrected for that. You and other folks in the neighborhoods benefit from having a lower share of the burden because we've corrected for that disparity. And that's something I want to get out to all the folks on this call. Like, sometimes it's sort of natural for an entrepreneur or a small business owner in the neighborhood to think you're in the same boat as that guy who owns a $2 billion building or $1 billion building downtown. It's pretty different. If that big building downtown is undervalued, everyone else makes up the difference. If that small commercial property in the neighborhoods is overassessed, that's something that also can be different from what we see in the rest of the city. So that differentiation is such an important thing to remember, Nicole.
Listen, it's 1 o'clock now, and I'd like to conclude with a couple observations or points. One is thank you. One thing nobody can criticize you about is lack of accessibility. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the call, but I don't know of any invitation that's been offered to you to speak to a real estate group that you have not accepted and answered all questions, including the tough ones. So thank you for that. The second point I'd like to make is that I think that your job is probably the easiest job description. That is, get it right and assess the value of real estate.
Yeah, estimate the value of buildings. Sounds easy.
But
right?
it's got to be the toughest job out there. There's so many interests, all legitimate. There are tax lawyers on this call who are my friends who are experts in the field, and I respect what they do, and I know you do. And from them, I've learned a lot. But we have the needs of the hotel industry that was flat during COVID, of the office sector, the retail, the south suburbs that have been historically overvalued. Folks like Rocco, at the end of the day, I'm going to use a really horrible analogy, but this I don't know if this is the amount of money that you have to raise. It's not like you are going out there to raise more money. This is decided by others. You just have to figure out how this money is going to be raised. And if a friend of mine who had a 320% increase in his multifamily property in Evanston, 320% increase at the Board of Review, he was able to get it down to a 4% increase. So what does that do? The effect of that is that it removes some of the revenue that you would have gotten from him, and that is added on to everybody else. At the end of the day, you're not trying to add to our county's revenue stream. You're just trying to hit your mandated goal. And that's a tough job.
Yeah, and really, and thank you, Mike. And why do I talk about big buildings versus small ones? It's like, it's my job to be the person who's trying to be fair to everyone, which, of course, no one is going to necessarily think they're being treated fairly, but, I have to think about the people who are appealing, but also the people who aren't. And our job, the job I give my team, is estimate the value of all these buildings in line with market with the best data that you have, and do it consistently and fairly for everyone. And we will try to identify where we make mistakes and get it right progressively better each time. So Mike, thank you for that. And thank you everyone on this call. Really appreciate you being there. We know you have a lot of questions. The chat was quite active. Scott will try to get to some of these. And Mike, I know you can send folks our way where we can try to address some of these questions. And it sounds like there might be some property specific stuff there too. Hey, thanks there, Pando. Appreciate you. Sounds like you had some issues too. So we'll make sure that we address your questions.
I'm going to take a sip of tax revenue and wish you well.
Okay. All right. I think I got the same beverage here.
Okay. So. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Scott. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Next week, Fritz, you might want to join us. We're going to have State's Attorney Kim Fox will be in your hot seat. And we look forward to meeting her. And really, with so many of us being in the neighborhoods, issues of public safety are right at probably the same level as tax assessment, or even higher in terms of priority for us. These are public safety, our property taxes. These are big issues, and we're pleased to have you today and pleased to have her next week. So we hope to see all of you next week as well. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good day.
Good to see everyone. Take care.